Here at Allegiant Precast, we are often asked about our concrete storm shelters and how they're made. There are several types and sizes of storm shelters, but precast concrete shelters are the most common and affordable solution. Each Allegiant Precast storm shelter meets the rigorous FEMA and ICC 500 standards and regulations for concrete storm shelters. Each concrete storm shelter is poured in two parts. The top half with a block out to create the door opening, and a bottom half that incorporates our signature concrete steps. The molds are thoroughly cleaned and oiled to ensure a smooth surface for the concrete. Steel wire is cut to precise sizes and bent into shape to create an internal steel cage of reinforcement. Wire is then put into the shelter mold one piece at a time, first the sides and back, then the top. The wire is then tied together using steel wire ties. After the cage is assembled, long pieces of rebar are tied into the cage to act as lifting hooks for use once the shelter is complete. More rebar is secured in each corner of the shelter to reinforce the corners during assembly. After the rebar is tied into place, vent tubes are added to the top half. A form release agent is applied to the entire mold to ensure the finished product will release easily from the molds. Our concrete formula is mixed using a specific ratio of rock, sand, cement, and water. This concrete mixture ensures that the shelter will be strong enough to withstand any storm. The shelter mold is closed and locked tight. Concrete is poured directly onto the cage and spread around by hand to fill each part of the mold. Vibrating motors on the sides of the molds help shake the concrete into every part of the mold. Air inside the molds gets trapped as the concrete enters, so a long vibrating tail is inserted into the mold to pull all the air pockets to the surface. Once the vibration is complete, concrete finishers smooth and shape the surface of the wet concrete. After allowing to dry for several hours, a worker returns to open the face of both molds. A concrete tool is used on the top mold to round the edges and corner. Then a worker brushes the top and face of the shelters to create a non-slip and finished surface. Once this final coat is complete, the shelter will be left to dry. Once the concrete is cured, it's time to assemble the shelter. Each half of the shelter weighs over 7,000 pounds. They are pulled out of the molds using the lifting hooks and moved to a prepping station. A quality check is done on each half, making sure all the wire is covered and no cracks form during the pulling process. A special concrete adhesive is applied to the bottom half of the shelter. This adhesive is strong enough to permanently bond the two halves together and acts as a sealant to prevent groundwater from entering the shelter. Slip-resistant tape is placed on each step for added safety. While the bottom half of the shelter is prepared, the door is installed on the top half. Allegiant Precast storm doors are powder-coated steel, which provides a durable and beautiful finish. The door is held in place with a metal flange that sits right in the opening of the shelter. Holes are then drilled and bolts permanently secure the door to the concrete. After the door is bolted down, a powerful waterproof sealant is applied around the edges of the door frame, both inside and out. Once the two halves are ready, it's time to put them together. The top half is lifted over the bottom half and carefully aligned and lowered into place. The concrete adhesive spreads and will quickly begin to dry. Steel plates are added to the outside of the shelter on both sides to stabilize the shelter while the adhesive dries. A handrail is installed on the inside and the shelter is now ready for final inspection. A production manager goes over each part of the shelter to ensure no defects are found in the final assembly. After any necessary repairs are complete, the manager adds our name and logo to the shelter door, signifying the completion of his quality control check. The shelter is then loaded onto a delivery truck and ready for delivery.